Eaton Fuller adjustment-free clutches, designed and engineered by Eaton Fuller. Verify that clutch torque is greater than engine torque. Read the label on the box. Verify flywheel opening 7-inch, 8.5-inch, 10-inch to ensure that the damper will fit into the flywheel cavity. Replace with the same type of damper. Solo is offered with dampers requiring a 7-inch, 8.5-inch, or 10-inch minimum opening. If you need to temporarily remove and then reinstall a Solo clutch, the following 9-step procedure must be performed prior to the clutch's removal from the flywheel. Failure to perform these steps will cause the Solo to drag or not release upon reinstallation. Please note, if the wear indicating tab is at or near the replace position, you can disregard the following 9-step process and install a new Solo clutch at this time. Also, if the Solo clutch was removed from the flywheel without first installing the 4 shipping bolts and you now wish to reinstall it, you must instead perform the out-of-vehicle resetting procedures described later in this video. The first step in the removal and reinstallation of a Solo clutch is to fully depress and hold the clutch pedal. Slide the wear indicating tab to the far left and hold at this new position. Let up on the clutch pedal and the tab will remain at the new position. Carefully remove the transmission, being sure to support its weight so that no damage will occur to the release bearing assembly or driven discs. Install the aligning tool into the clutch assembly. Because this assembly weighs approximately 150 pounds, it is recommended that a clutch jack be used when removing the clutch from the flywheel. Next, install 4 7/16" by 14 by 1 3/4" coarse thread machine screws finger tight plus 1 full turn. These 4 shipping bolts will cage the pressure plate, thus preventing the 4 plate spacers from moving out of position when you remove the clutch from the flywheel. Carefully remove the clutch from the flywheel, being sure to mark all the clutch parts so they can be properly reoriented during reinstallation. Inspect the ceramic buttons and their mating parts for an oily or grease-covered condition, being sure to eliminate the source of this contamination before the clutch is reinstalled. Please note, Eaton Fuller does not recommend the reuse of contaminated discs. You must replace with new discs. Using a 5/8" wrench, progressively tighten the 4 shipping bolts in a crisscross pattern until the face of the pressure plate is 1 3/4" minimum below the mounting surface. Important: failure to perform this step properly may cause the Solo clutch to drag or not release upon reinstallation. Reinstall the clutch according to the Solo installation procedures shown later in this video, being careful to properly reorient the clutch parts. If the Solo clutch will not be reinstalled, you need to perform only steps 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the previous section before proceeding to the installation section shown later in this video. Begin by wiping all surfaces which the gauging will contact. Secure the dial indicator to the flywheel housing touching the flywheel surface. Rotate the flywheel 1 rotation and measure total indicated runout. The maximum allowed is 0.008 of an inch, 0.008 or less. Measure the pilot bearing bore. Maximum allowed is 0.005, 0.005 inches. Measure the face of the flywheel housing, then measure the inside diameter of the housing. The maximum allowed is 0.008, 0.008 inches. Install a new premium C3, C4, C5 fit pilot bearing with high temperature grease and Viton seals. This will ensure long pilot bearing life. Inspect for wear at the cross shaft and bushing areas and at the fingers of the release yoke. Replace any parts which are worn excessively. Next, check for wear and roughness at the transmission bearing retainer cap. Refer to the installation and adjustment instructions packaged with the clutch for the acceptable amount of wear on this cap. Check the input shaft splines and replace if any wear is noticed. Any wear on the splines will prevent the newly installed driven discs from sliding freely, causing a drag or poor release complaint. Also check the stub of the input shaft for any damage from the pilot bearing. Replace if damaged or worn excessively. Next, check the non-splined area of the input shaft for any wear or roughness from a previous sleeve bushing failure. Roughness in this area will cause the sleeve bushing of the new clutch to fail. Always install a new input shaft if this condition exists. Install a new Eaton Fuller clutch brake at this time. It does not matter which side you orient toward the transmission. The heavy-duty Solo adjustment-free clutch is available in two different versions, the standard Solo and the XL or extended lube version. The first type is our original adjustment-free clutch, which utilizes a standard release yoke to disengage the clutch. It has a greasable release bearing which requires lubrication after every 10,000 miles. The second type of Solo clutch is called the XL, or extended lube version. It requires lubrication every 50,000 miles. The two cast ribs on its release bearing housing identify this clutch as the XL version. The XL version requires the use of a special release yoke in the place of the standard type yoke. This yoke can only be used with the XL Solo. This roller yoke must be installed with the engine side notation facing the engine. Because a new roller yoke is always packaged with these clutches, it is always recommended that it be installed with the new clutch. Refer to the label on the outside of the clutch box to determine which version of the heavy-duty Solo you are installing. There are three sizes of flywheel openings. If the opening is 7 inches, you must use a Solo with an 8-spring damper. If the flywheel opening is 8.5 inches, then a Solo with a 10-spring damper should be used. If the flywheel opening is greater than 9 3/4 inches, then a 6 or 7-spring damper should be installed, the exception being Mack trucks with Mack engines, which require a special 9-spring damper. Installing too large of a damper in too small of an opening will cause the following conditions. 1. The Solo's release bearing will be too close to the clutch brake, which will prevent the Solo from setting up, and 2. The clutch won't release due to insufficient bearing travel and also due to interference between the front disc and the flywheel. Once you have confirmed that the driven disc damper will fit into the flywheel opening, you must next verify that the engine's peak torque does not exceed the clutch's torque rating. Refer to the label on the outside of the clutch box for the clutch's torque rating. In traditional clutches, when the clutch facing gets worn, the bearing slides toward the clutch, resulting in loss of free pedal and the need for an adjustment. But the Solo clutch compensates for wear through a patented sliding cam technology. Above the pressure plate, there are two interlocking cams. The top one is attached to a high-tensile spring, which is anchored on the other end to the clutch cover. Also on the clutch cover are 4 plate spacers, situated at equal intervals around the surface. So how do all these parts work together? Quite ingeniously. When the bearing is released, the plate spacers sense for wear. If wear has occurred, the spacers release the load on the cams, allowing the spring to engage. The spring pulls the top cam across the bottom one, which pushes the clutch discs back out to their original position. Thus, the clutch is continually kept in perfect adjustment. What's more, there's a tab permanently attached to the top cam that is visible through a slot in the clutch cover. When the cam slides, the tab moves with it, revealing at a glance how much wear has occurred. This allows you to plan ahead and do maintenance when it's preventive rather than imperative. The cast cover can be easily broken if mishandled and dropped. The discs can be easily bent or distorted. Never let a transmission hang on the discs or apply excessive force during the transmission installation. If the discs are distorted, the clutch will not release. Note the markings on the components. They are marked in various ways. For example, flywheel side, pressure plate side, intermediate plate side. Many clutches use the same disc in the front and rear positions, and these will be marked intermediate plate side. The new 6 spring can be installed in any direction. A disc incorrectly installed will cause a no-release condition and could damage the discs. A solo assembly weighs approximately 150 pounds, and the use of a clutch jack is recommended. Place cover assembly on input shaft. Place rear disc on shaft. Note markings on disc, pressure plate side or intermediate plate side. Place intermediate plate in cover slots with roll pins flush on pressure plate side and protruding toward flywheel side. Install front disc, again noting markings either toward flywheel or intermediate plate. Put the clutch into position on the guide studs and start 6 7/16 inch by 2 1/4 inch grade 5 or better mounting bolts with lock washers. Remove the guide studs and install the remaining 2 bolts. Starting with the lower left-hand bolt, progressively tighten the 8 mounting bolts in a crisscross pattern. Final torque is 40 to 50 pounds-foot. Note, failure to follow this procedure could break or crack the cover assembly, prevent the cover from centering into the pilot, or cause an out-of-balance condition. Progressively remove the 4 yellow shipping resetting bolts in a crisscross pattern. This will allow the pressure plate to move toward the engine and will clamp the disc to the flywheel. Save these bolts for future resetting or removal of a solo. Now remove the aligning tool. Never remove a solo clutch unless the 4 resetting bolts are installed. The plate spacers and cams will be out of correct position and the clutch will not release after reinstallation. To verify that the intermediate plate positive separator pins are against the flywheel, insert a 1/4 inch flat nose punch and lightly tap each of the 4 pins. Only lightly tap the pins or you could damage them. Shift the transmission into gear. Align the transmission to the engine. After inserting the input shaft, maintain the correct alignment. Do not drop the rear of the transmission or the discs can be bent or distorted. This will cause a no-release condition. Rotate the output yoke to align the input shaft splines with the splines in the clutch discs. Rotate the yoke over the release bearing, being careful not to force the yoke fingers into the clutch cover. The casting can be broken or cracked by improper installation. Do not use the external clutch arm to pull the transmission into position. If the bearing is pulled, the clutch will misadjust and cause the bearing to be near the clutch brake after installation. The clutch will not release. Install the transmission mounting bolts and torque to specifications. To properly set up the solo, the bearing must be pulled until it contacts and squeezes the clutch brake. The linkage must be set to allow for maximum stroke of the release bearing. Connect the truck linkage and set the clearance between the yoke fingers and the bearing to 0. There will be no free pedal in the cab. This will add stroke to the bearing and move it toward the clutch brake. Stroke the pedal in the cab 5 times. Indications that the solo is adjusting will be 1. Movement of the wear tab from the new position slightly toward the replaced position. 2. An increase in free play at the clutch pedal. And 3. The release bearing will seat itself closer to the clutch brake. Again, set the yoke fingers and bearing clearance to 0 and stroke the pedal 5 times. Repeat this procedure until the yoke rotation causes the bearing to squeeze the clutch brake against the transmission with enough force to clamp a 10/1000-inch feeler gauge inserted between the brake and the clutch bearing. When the pedal is in the up position, the correct release bearing position will be 500 thousandths to 560 thousandths away from the clutch brake. The Solo has correctly set the bearing position. Do not pry or hammer on the wear indicator tab in an attempt to change the adjustment. Doing so will break the wear indicator tab. Plus, moving the wear indicator tab will not alter the final position of the release bearing. Adjust the truck linkage to get 1/16" clearance between the yoke and the release bearing. This will result in the correct in-cab free pedal. When the pedal is less than 1 inch from the end of the stroke in the cab, the release bearing should be applying enough force to clamp a 10/1000 feeler gauge between the bearing and the brake. If the pedal is more than 1 inch from the floor, increase the amount of clearance between the yoke and bearing. This will increase the free pedal in the cab. If the full pedal movement in the cab will not rotate the yoke enough to move the bearing against the clutch brake and squeeze it, you must check the truck linkage for wear or increase the pedal movement in the cab to increase yoke rotation. If the clutch you just installed is either a standard or XL Solo, be sure to lubricate the release bearing until the lube purges onto the transmission input shaft. Including the release bearing, this excess grease will also prolong the life of the 2 bronze bushings inside the release sleeve. Do not be concerned if grease gets onto the clutch brake, since it will not affect the brake's stopping ability. Eaton Fuller recommends an EP number 2 grease with a minimum operating temperature of 325 degrees Fahrenheit. In addition, if the clutch you have just installed is a standard Solo, apply grease to both of the yoke fingers and also to both of the cross shafts. The following resetting procedure is necessary if you 1. Remove the Solo clutch from the flywheel without first installing the 4 shipping bolts, and 2. Now wish to reinstall the clutch. Failure to observe the following resetting procedures will prevent the clutch from releasing upon reinstallation. Please note, this information is also available within the installation and adjustment wall chart packaged with each Solo clutch. Support the clutch in an arbor press, allowing approximately 1 inch of space beneath the release bearing. Center the ram and move the retainer downward until you can slide the wear indicating tab to the new position. While holding the tab at this position, let up on the ram. The wear indicating tab should remain at the new position. Install 4 7/16 by 14 by 1 3/4 inch long coarse thread shipping bolts until they are finger tight. Using a 5/8 inch wrench, progressively hand tighten these 4 shipping bolts until the pressure plate is a minimum of 1 3/4 inches below the cover's mounting surface. This will allow the 4 plate spacers to be repositioned to their correct height. Note, failure to perform this step properly may cause the Solo clutch to drag or to not release upon reinstallation. Warning: the major cause of clutch failure is excessive heat. Excessive heat generated from the flywheel, driven discs, intermediate plate, and pressure plate can cause the metal to flow and the friction material to be destroyed. If this occurs, the clutch can burst, resulting in property damage, serious bodily injury, or death. Recommended vehicle loads should not be exceeded. The clutch should be used only for recommended applications. Drivers should be properly trained in the starting, shifting, and operation of the clutch. Drivers should report erratic clutch operation as soon as possible to permit maintenance personnel to inspect, adjust, or lubricate as required. Mechanics must be familiar with the proper clutch adjustment, linkage adjustment, lubrication, and other maintenance and troubleshooting procedures outlined in the Failure Analysis Guide and the Eaton Service Manual. For additional technical information, refer to the Installation and Adjustment Wall Chart packaged with each Solo clutch. You may also refer to the Heavy Duty Solo Troubleshooting Manual.